Hi guys, welcome to today's lesson. So we're carrying on with this this portrait study working from the reference from the Met Museum, this daguerreotype that I was using. And we're just building really, so this is sort of like a in-between session where we're trying to build a bit more body into the piece. So it's completely dry. Painting's touch dry from the last time I worked on it. So the second two sessions we were working sort of wet into wet, and we're going to be doing a similar sort of thing this time, continuing to kind of just build up. So you can sort of see now that it's dry underneath, I can rebuild another kind of pass. So this is just some raw umber and burnt umber mixed together. And what I want to do is just start to add a bit more depth into the darker tones. But this glazing process, so the fact that I'm just glazing over those shapes that were developed previously, means that we're keeping the same information. So the relationships between forms and stuff like that is still in place, but I can just kind of push things a bit darker where I want to do that. And we're going to go a lot darker. I'm going to actually start mixing a little bit of black into this glaze. As we get down into the clothing. And I mentioned in the first few videos where we're working like this as well, but this kind of gradual application of passes means we can get this quite soft look without really, it's not exactly blending. So when you're blending, it can be a bit trickier because you've got lots of colors together and you're trying to get this sort of smudgy look maybe all at the same time, and things can kind of go muddy when you're doing that, whereas this particular approach, doing these passages, means that they kind of naturally will look kind of fuzzy. If you've heard of like sfumato, which is a technique developed by Leonardo da Vinci, that uses these sorts of passes. So that's sort of one of the places it kind of comes from. So rather than blending tones together, on the canvas, which we will be doing as well, you know, a lot of the transitions can also come from this glazing layering process. So you can sort of see if I kind of put that kind of allow these glazes to travel over the edge, it starts to create this sort of softer look to the edge of the hair, which is nice, often what we go for with hair, or whether we're transitioning down into this forehead. And we're going to be starting to blend out of this sort of as this particular video progresses and in subsequent sessions. But basically, if I add more of the darker tone, it just goes darker, and if I add less, it doesn't go as dark. So that's really it. We're going to start to do some actual direct blendings in a moment, but just having a look at sort of how far you can push building more detail by passes. And I mean, if you've got the time and you feel like it, you can just do the whole thing in this way, so you don't necessarily have to directly blend much at all. You can either do passes where you're painting lighter tones, passes where you're painting darker tones over each other. Now I can do some very sort of faint passes over sections where it's more sort of half tone. But these are what we're going to be working on in a moment, kind of blending into these tones. But it can be helpful to have something to kind of work with, so that's looking all right. The next thing I want to do is still sticking with the same brush. I'll start building some of these mid-tones up more directly and more thickly. I've just got some white and burnt umber. Taking a smaller brush, possibly slightly too small, but this is the one I've got to hand from a previous thing I was working on earlier, so it'll do. And use that to start building, sort of heightening into these halftones. But yeah, essentially what what I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to build up some more body into the light. So we don't want the light parts of the painting to be quite so washy as they have been. When I say washy, I mean sort of thinner. So in the same way you might kind of build up with white chalk, I'm just starting to paint these passes of lighter paint. Which will develop even more in future sessions. Because it's something that we can kind of just gradually build, which is what we'll be doing. So where I want lighter tones, I'm just starting to add more and more paint. So I think in the next session we'll be kind of working primarily in the lights. And we can also start to do some stuff like more complex stuff, like glazing some warmer tones over these lights, which say they get too cool and they maybe look like they're getting a little bit sort of cooler or kind of more neutral than the warmer tones. We can amend that by doing some thin washes of stuff like burnt umber over them. But really with this monochrome, I'm mostly concerned with just trying to get the right sort of sense of how the form develops. So traditionally these sorts of paintings can be the basis for color pieces. So there's a lot of kind of modes of traditional painting where you sort of can create a monochrome and then you glaze your color over the top. So you could take something like this and then start to kind of glaze yellows and pinks and stuff like that over the surface. But you may have already built, in the way that we are here, started to build up a lot of the surface texture, the body and the light parts of the painting prior to doing that. And what it sort of allows us to do, rather than affords, is that we can focus a lot more on the drawing aspect of the piece, so like light and dark, but before trying to tackle the colors. And there are different sort of schools of thought about that. Some people think it's better to it's more naturalistic to kind of jump straight into working with the color, or maybe you have a bit more control if you do that. Maybe it's a bit more efficient as well, arguably. Personally, I actually will tend to work more in direct color rather than in this mode. Sometimes I work more like this than others. I'm a bit of an erratic painter though, so I'll kind of hop around between styles. I don't tend to adhere really strictly to one mode of painting. I actually enjoy kind of jumping around between stuff, and some pieces just kind of like feel like they work better with this approach, and some feel better if you kind of jump straight in with color. A bit of a digression into the shadows there, which is fine. You really can jump around more easily than if you're working in color, you can sort of jump between different sections because we're just working with such a limited palette, so we're just using the burnt umber and raw umber, and then white and black. Just doing a little bit of push and pull with this nose tip in terms of values, making some parts lighter, some parts darker. And altering the shape slightly as well. Just adding some of these grey tones into the rest of the half-tone sections. And I also just want to throw a few darker notes back in. But we're just nearing the end of this session. So maybe adding too much more, or just roughly leave it at this point, let it dry, as I say. You can keep kind of tweaking things through each phase. So I just kind of want to show you, once it's dried, how it can get easier to maybe make corrections or look at shapes. I mean, the drying process also just kind of naturally gives you a bit of time away from the piece. So if you work on it for a session, it can be good to kind of go back to it after a little bit of a break and reassess things at that point. So I'm just going to clean my brush off actually, and pop some light notes back in, which I kind of did at the end of last session a bit as well, I think. Just some pure white here and there, just to keep all the brightest bits, highlights pretty evident. It's in the center of a lot of the forms, around this middle part of the face, middle and right. forehead as well. As I say, we can do some more passes of warmer colours over the piece to kind of remove this sort of maybe slightly excessively grey cast that we've got. The other thing we can do is we'll have a look at maybe doing some sort of black glazes over the shadows, which will make them a little bit make the shadows a bit grayer rather than necessarily making the lights warmer, because there is warmth to the lights, they're just not quite as warm as the shadows. So at the moment they're kind of conflicting a bit, but that's something that we'll be kind of working on as we develop more of the piece. So yeah, that's looking not too bad. So the final thing I want to do is I'll just pop some more highlights into the eyes. Whites of the eyes. A little bit more. That lip as well. Maybe a little bit on that chin. Yeah, so that's looking not too bad for this week, and we're getting back into it next session. But yeah, you can sort of see some of those forms starting to build up. There's still a lot that will need to be corrected, but it's getting there. We're getting closer to the value relationships that we want, and it's just with this gradual progression. So hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Let me know if you have any feedback, any extra questions and so on, or how you're getting on if you have a go at it yourself. From the reference, it's just down in the description below. But yeah, that's it for today. As always, if you want to keep up to date with future videos from myself and other teachers and students at the school, you can follow us on YouTube, and if you want to see the sorts of paid qualifications that we offer, you can click the link through to our profile and have a browse on the website. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.